Okay, so we have x squared minus 3x minus 10. Now, we did this a while back, so this is not new. In fact, you could do this with trial and error still. It's very easy to do by trial and error. But I want to review the way we did it at the beginning. So what we did at the beginning was we noticed that x squared has what coefficient? 1. And so we asked ourselves, we said, all right, I want to find two numbers whose product is what?
10.
Negative 10, and whose sum is negative 3, right? And so then we figure out, well, let's kind of determine what two numbers would give me a product of negative 10, and the sum would be negative 3. What would you want to try?
Negative 4, negative 5.
Negative 5 and positive 2? Is that correct? All right, so that's one that would work. And so what we then did was we put that inside the parentheses. Remember that? So we said x times x is x squared. And then we said, then we're going to put the negative 5 and the negative 2 like this. And we were done. Although we did have to check the outer and the inner. What's the outer? Oh, I'm sorry. It's not negative 2. It's positive 2, right? Okay, thank you. Because it's negative 5, positive 2. So 2x and the inner was negative 5x. And when I add them up, I do get a negative 3x. This is an idea of the AC method. Okay, notice I said AC. So let's talk about what I mean by A and C. Okay, so then this is going to be factor using the AC method. Okay, so the standard form for a quadratic expression that we've been dealing with has been this. It's ax squared plus bx plus c. So x squared plus bx plus c. And notice that the a I'm referring to is the coefficient of x squared. The b I'm referring to is the coefficient of x, and the c is your constant. If there's no variable attached with it, it's a constant. It's always going to be c. So in this case, what was a? 1. What was b? Negative 3. And what was c? Negative 10. So when we talk about the AC method, means this. We want to find two numbers whose product is, now remember when we did this one, we just said the last term, right? And we did that because the coefficient of x squared was what, though? 1. So a was 1. But what we're really doing is using the AC method, because when I multiply a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 10, I got what? Negative 10. But this time, if I look at this one, that's a 37. A is no longer 1. What is a this time? 4. Now, if that was a 1, then I would say, just like I did this one, I would say, let's find two numbers whose product is 9 and whose sum is what? 37. But we did that only if x squared had a coefficient of 1. It's not this time. It's what? 4. So when using the AC method, AC, you want to find two numbers whose product is AC. Well, what is A in this case? No, 4, right? What is B in this case? 37. What is C in this case? 9. So I want two numbers whose product is AC and whose sum is B. Just like we did before. The sum is that B term, the B coefficient, right? So in this case, I want to find two numbers whose product is 4 times what? 9, which is 36, and whose sum is B, and what's B in this case? 37. So that's the idea we want to look at. Now, when we did this right here, though, once I found those two numbers that worked, I went directly to the parentheses. And the reason I could do that is because these first terms were the same. Now they're not going to be like that. So I can't go directly to the parentheses like I did here. I can't just put in these numbers inside those parentheses. The AC method involves grouping. The AC method involves grouping. And remember in a previous worksheet when you dealt with grouping, how many terms were involved? 4. How many terms do you see here? 3. So basically what's going to happen with the AC method is you're going to rewrite the middle term as 2 terms. That's what you're going to do. All right, so listen carefully. So I'm going to use this little x. You don't have to. You can use whatever approach you want to, but the thinking needs to be this way. I want to find 2 numbers whose product is AC. A times C, product AC, which in this case is what? Which is 36. 4 times 9, 36, right? So AC has to be what? 36. So I'm going to put the product up here. I'm going to put the sum down here. And the sum is B. And what's B in this case? 37. In some cases, very obvious. What are you going to use? So if it's not obvious, though, if it's not obvious, then do a table to help you come up with those numbers. Do a table and then ask yourself, what 2 numbers can I put here and that product's 36? Well, there's 6 times 6, right? 6 times 6 is what? 36. And when I add them up, the sum is what? 12. Is that what I wanted? No. So that's not going to be the one I'm going to use. You may say, all right, I'm going to try 3 times 12. What's 3 times 12? 36, but what's the sum? 15. So that's not going to work. So what do you think you're going to do next? What are you going to try? 36 and 1. So 36, you can put 1 first or 36 first. It does not matter. It does not matter. And when I multiply them, I do get what? 36. And when I add them up, I do get what? 37. So of those 3 pairs of numbers, which one am I going to use? 36 and 1. So that means, see what I'm doing here? I'm putting the pairs that work. So that means 36 and 1 will work. So what I do now is this. I have to remember the AC method involves grouping. So that means I got to rewrite that middle term using those 2 numbers. Rewriting that middle term to involve 2 terms. So in other words, watch what happens. I'm going to get 4x squared. And then this 37x, I'm going to rewrite as plus 36x and then plus what? 1x or just x, right? And then plus what? 9. It's still the original problem. I haven't changed the original problem. It's still equivalent to the original problem because what's 36x plus x? 37x. I just, instead of writing it as 3 terms, I wrote it as 4 terms. And the reason you want to write as 4 terms is so that way you can use grouping now. You can use grouping. Now, it did not matter whether you put 36x first or x first. So someone else could have said this, 4x squared plus x plus 36x plus 9, right? Someone else could have done that. Is that clear? If I group those now, remember you had several worksheets in the first section on grouping. Let's do the second one for right now. If I group the first 2 here, what's the GCF of the first group? No, not 1. What's the GCF of that first group right here, guys? You had this on your first on a couple worksheets in that x, right? So when I factor out the x, what are you left with? 4x plus 1. Right? From the second group, what's the GCF? No, 9. And remember, you always factor out that positive, that middle sign. So you can factor out a positive 9. You must say plus 9. Not just 9, you got to say plus 9. Times, now if you're doing this correctly, if it is factorable by grouping, these two parentheses better have the same binomial. So what's 9? 9 times what's 36x? 9 times what's positive 9? Plus 1.
Why did you switch the x and the 36 to 36?
Right here?
Yeah.
Just to show you it did not matter whether you put 36 first or x first. I'll do both ways. You'll see we get the same answer. No. But I'm gonna do the other one just to remind you of a couple of things. Once you did this, what was the next step you did in that worksheet we had previously? Factor out the GCF of those two terms. What are you going to factor out? 4x plus 1, and then you're going to say times what? X plus 9. So there's your answer. So 4x plus 1 times x plus 9. If I had done it the other way, see this right here, put the 36 first, let's see what we get. If I group the first two, what's the GCF of that first group? 4x. 4x times what? X plus 9, right? All right, now, look at that second group. What's the GCF? 1. So you got to factor out the GCF of 1. So you got to say plus 1 times what? X plus 9. You had to say that. You had to say plus 1 times x plus 9. And now those two terms have what in common? X plus 9. So I get x plus 9 times what? 4x plus 1, which is the same as this one. All right. So the order in which you put those numbers you come up with does not matter. You'll get the same answer. Now, in some cases, probably this right here, it probably would have been quicker. Now, that's assuming you understand trial and error and you're good at it. It might have been quicker to have done this problem trial and error, just like we did previously. But on the worksheet, some will say use AC method, some will say trial and error. So you got to follow directions. So you have to know both ways. You have to know both ways. Okay? All right, let's look at number 3. So again, the rest of what we do today will be AC method. Now, you received a handout last class period. I need you to get that handout out. It looked like this. If I can find mine. It looked like this. So go ahead and take that one out. You picked it up in the back table of the last class period. So that's factoring using the AC method with grouping. I don't think there are any extra. You didn't pick one up last class period? Here. Anyone else needs one? There's one on the floor right there. Anyone else? Okay. So let's kind of review what we did. So the first thing, it says this: make sure the trinomial is in standard form. So in this case, descending order. Then it says factor out the GCF. Now, we haven't done one yet, but remember, the first thing you always got to ask yourself is, what's the GCF, right? All right, so that'll be the next thing. Step 3 then says multiply A and C together. That's your product. And then you want to identify B. And B is going to be your sum, right? Okay. So then we listed the factors of A and C. See this right here? We listed the factors of the product. That's what this says. And then continue until you find a pair of numbers that multiply to get you AC and add up to be what? B. That's what this says. Then step 5 said use those two numbers you found to rewrite the trinomial as how many terms? 4. Then step 6 says factor by what? Grouping. So we group the first two, group the last two, and then we go from there. Okay? All right, that's the AC method. So let's look at number 3. All right, number 3, suppose you had 6x squared minus 17x plus 12. 6x squared minus 17x plus 12. It's in descending order. What's the GCF? 1. All right, now if I were doing this trial and error, then I would go directly to the two binomials, right? All right, but I'm not doing this trial and error. The direction said use AC method. So then let's go ahead and list A. What's A? 6. And what's C? And what's B? Not 17. Negative 17. You got to keep the sign. All right, always make sure you're keeping the sign. So now, AC method, I want to find two numbers whose product is AC. 6 times, so 6 times, I'm going to put it up here, 6 times 12, right? And that's what? 72. And whose sum is B, which in this case is what? Negative 17. So you need a calculator possibly to help you with those pairs of numbers. So, yeah, so sometimes it's quick to come up with them. Sometimes it's not, though. So, for example, someone could have said, remember, you want two numbers whose product is 72. So someone could have said 3 times, what's that? 3 times what, 72? 24? All right. Now, listen carefully. You see the last sign's positive, right? So that means that these two signs have to be the same. But I need the sum to be what number, though? Negative. So that means that both of them have to be what? Negative. Y'all see that? Okay. Now, what's the sum, though? So the product is still positive 72, but what's the sum? Negative 27? That's not what you wanted. What did you want? Negative 17. So then we try another pair of numbers. So come up with another pair. Negative 8, negative 9. Y'all agree? So you got to come up with some pairs. Come up with some pairs of numbers that gives you that product. And now you check the sign. I'm sorry, you check the sum. So what's a negative 8 and a negative 9? And that's what you wanted. So that's the one I'm going to use. So I'm going to use negative 8 and negative 9. So that means I'm going to rewrite the middle term using those two numbers. Okay? So tell me what you would write. 6x squared. Okay, you want to put the 9x? Could someone else have put 8x minus 8x? Does not matter. So minus 9x, what else? Minus 8x and then plus 12. So basically you rewrote the middle term using those two terms here. Now how many terms do you see? So you're going to try factoring by grouping. So let's group the first two, group the last two. What can you factor out of the first group? 3x. 3x. So if I factor out 3x, I get 3x times 2x minus 3. Okay? What can I factor out that second group?
4.
Not a 4.
Negative 4.
Negative 4. You got to factor out that negative sign, that middle sign. So the GCF is not 4. The GCF is going to be a negative 4 that I'm going to factor out. Now, negative 4 times what's a negative 8x? 2x. Negative 4 times what's a positive 12? Negative 3. And if you're doing this correctly, if it is factored by grouping, I'm doing it correctly, those two parentheses better have the same binomial. So now these two terms here have the same factor in common, 2x minus 3. So what's going to be the answer? Right, 2x minus 3 times 3x minus 4. So that's your answer.
When we do our homework, you want us to put on a separate sheet like that too?
On the worksheet, I think there's enough room to where there's enough room here.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's no separate sheet for that one. Okay, number 4. suppose we had 4x squared minus 19x minus 30. 4x squared minus 19x minus 30. By the way, normally, you see how I didn't put the -8, -9? You don't have to. But you would see this, like that -8, -9 is the one that's going to work, and so that's the one you would use. But if you left it off, it's no big deal. In fact, most students prefer doing just a table. But you got to remember, though, that AC is a positive 72, and then B is a negative 17. You got to keep that in mind. What's A in this case?
4.
Not 4x. 4, right? A is a coefficient of x squared. What's B in this case? B. Negative 19. And what's C?
Negative 30.
Negative 30. So I want to find two numbers whose product is AC. So meaning 4 times what? Negative 30, which is negative 120. And I want the sum to be what? Negative 19. So if you want to use that little x, you could. You don't have to. You could go directly to the table. So I need this to be a negative 120. I need the product to be negative 120, and I need the sum to be negative 19. So use the table, though. You still have to use a table. What do you want to try? Okay, so notice that the product is negative, right? So that means that one has to be negative, the other one has to be positive. So what'd you say? Negative 24 and 5. So she probably used her calculator to figure that out. Is that what you did? Yeah. So basically, you're looking at negative 120. You ask yourself, what factors will go into negative 120? First one is, well, 1 goes to everything, right? But the next one is 5, right? 5 times what is 120? 5 times what is 120? You just, guys, you know how to do this in your calculator, right? You say 120 divided by 5. What's 120 divided by 5? 24. Okay? So 5 times 24 is 120. But it's a negative 120. So 1 has to be positive. But I want you to think about this. I know you're not going to use negative 5 and what was the other one? 24?
Yeah.
You're not going to do that one because I want the sum to be what? Negative. So that means that the larger number had to be negative. But even if you didn't know that, you make sure you check to make sure that the sum is what you want. What's this sum here? A positive 19. I wanted a negative. So that means that I should use what? 5 and a negative 24, because that sum's going to be negative 19. So then I need a 5 and a negative 24. So those are the two numbers I'm going to use to rewrite negative 19x. 5 and negative 24. Now you can put 5 first or you can put negative 24 first. Does not matter. Okay, so tell me what you want to write. So you're going to say 4x squared, then what else? Minus 24x. What else? Plus 5x, and then what? Minus 30? Okay. Someone else could have said 5x minus 24x, right? Okay, let's group. From the first group, what can I factor out? 4x. What do I get? 4x times what? X minus 6. Bringing some timetables in here. From the second group, what are you going to factor out? Plus 5, right? Positive 5. 5 times what's 5x? 5 times what's a negative 30? Negative 6. If it's factored by grouping, you're doing it correctly. Those two parentheses better be the same. And they are. So then that means you can factor out what they have in common, which is x minus 6. And what's the answer? Yep. So there's your answer. Okay? All right, let's look at number 5. Okay, number 5, suppose we had this. we had negative 15 plus 7x plus 2x squared. Again, the direction says AC method, so you got to use the AC method. What do you want to do first? Rewrite in descending order. So that's going to become 2x squared plus 7x minus 15. All right, so let's determine what A, B, and C are. What's A? What's B? B, 7, and C, negative 15. All right, so I want to find two numbers whose product is AC, meaning 2 times A, negative 15. So I want that product to be negative 30. And I want the sum to be B, which is what? 7. So if you want to go directly to that table, you can. So try two numbers whose product is negative 30 and whose sum is a positive 7. Will negative 6 and 5 work? No. Their product's negative 30, but what's the issue? The sum is what? The sum is negative 1, right? I wanted 7. So it's negative 6 and positive 5 won't work. What do you think might work? 10 and negative 3? Let's try it. 10 times negative 3 is a negative 30. 10 plus a negative 3 is a what? Positive 7. So that's the one that works. So then you're going to rewrite that 7x using those two numbers. Does not matter whether you put 10x first or negative 3x. Does not matter. So tell me what you want to write. 2x squared plus 10x minus 3x minus 15. Okay. So I rewrote 7x using 10x minus 3x. How many terms do you now see? 4. So factor by grouping. For the first group, what can I factor out? 2x. So you get 2x times what? X plus 5. From the second group, make sure you factor out a negative 3. What are you left with? From negative 3 times x plus 5. Because a negative 3 times a positive 5 is a negative 15. And then now notice that those two factors are the same. So you can get x plus 5 times 2x minus 3. Okay. All right, number 6. (36x cubed plus 33x squared plus 6x). 36x cubed plus 33x squared plus 6x. What's the GCF? No, not 6. 6 doesn't go into 33 evenly. 3x. GCF is 3x. So then you're going to factor out at 3x. You get 3x times, what's going to be inside the parentheses? 3x times what? 36x cubed. 12x squared. 3x times what is 33x squared? 11x. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then 3x times what is 6x? Plus 2. All right, so we go off to the side and we figure out, using the AC method, how to factor this trinomial that's inside the parentheses. Now don't forget, this 3x is my GCF, so I'm going to have to put that in my final answer, right? Okay, so let's go off to the side and deal with this 12x squared plus 11x plus 2. What's A? 12. What is B? And what is C? 2. So I need two numbers whose product is A times C. So 12 times what? 2, which is C. C is 2. 24? All right, so be careful because it is very common for people to multiply 12 times 11 because that's what they see besides each other. So you got to be careful. It's AC, not AB. AC. And the sum is b, and what's b in this case? 11. So let's do the table. Sometimes it's easy to come up with the answers very quickly. So two numbers whose product is 24 and whose sum is 11. What do y'all think? 8 and 3. 8 and 3. Because 8 times 3 is 20. 8 times 3 is 24, and 8 plus 3 is 11. Okay? So then you're going to rewrite. You're going to rewrite this trinomial right here, 12x squared plus 11x plus 2, as 4 terms using 8 and 3. So you can say 12x squared. What do we put next? 8 what?
Plus 8x.
8x, right? You got to say that x. Plus what? 3x, and then plus 2. All right. Now group. What does the first group have in common? 4x. You get 4x times what?
3x plus 2.
You all agree? 3x plus 2, because 4x times 2 is 8x. From the second group, we had one earlier. From the second group, what is the GCF? 1. So you have to factor out that 1, though. So you can say plus what? 1 times what? 3x plus 2. And now both of those are the same binomial, and that's inside the parentheses. So when I factor this 12x squared plus 11x plus 2, I'm going to get 3x plus 2 times what?
4x plus 1.
4x plus 1. But that's not my answer, because remember, that is a factorization for this trinomial, but that was not my original. The original, remember, you had to factor out a 3x. So what's the answer? 3x times 3x plus 2 times 4x plus 1. All right, let's do one more. So this is going to be number 7. Number 7. One more. All right, suppose you had this. 24x squared y plus 34xy plus 12y. What's the GCF? 3 does not go into 34 evenly. Y. GCF is just y. Okay? So I'm going to get y times what? 24x squared plus 34x plus 12. But then I want you see how some of you said y? But then I want you to look at what we have here, 24, 34, and 12. What could have been the GCF? Or what should have been the GCF? 2y. See, most of you said y. No one said 2y. Most of you said y. So I used the y. I factored out, and then I came up with this. But then, if you look at it a little bit more closely, you would have realized, hey, this is a 24, this is a 34, this is a 12. Those are even numbers, which means they're all divisible by what? 2. So really, the GCF is not y, but the GCF is what? 2y. So that means then that this becomes 2y times what? 12x squared plus 17x, and then plus what? 6? All right, so let's go off to the side and then rewrite 12x squared plus 17x plus 6. What's A? What's B? And what's C? 6. So I want two numbers whose product is AC, which in this case is 12 times 6. What's 12 times 6? 72. And whose sum is B, which in this case is what? 17. All right, so let's kind of figure it out. Use your calculator to help you. What? 8 and 9? You agree? Because 8 times 9 is what? And when you add them up, what do you get? 17. So real quick, we're going to rewrite this 12x squared plus 17x plus 6. That's 4 terms. So you're going to say 12x squared plus what? What do you want to put next? 8x? Then what? And then what? Okay, now let's group. From the first group, what can I factor out? 4x. And you get 3x plus 2. From the second group, you're going to factor out a what? Positive 3. And you're left with 3x plus 2. So now, remember, if it's factored by group and you're doing it correctly, those two parentheses better be the same binomial. So factor it out, you get 3x plus 2 times 4x plus 3. Now be careful. You'll get most of your points. You want to get them all if you say that's the answer. Remember, that's a factorization for this 12x squared plus 17x plus 6. That was not the original. The original was this. Remember, you factor out a what? 2y. So the answer is 2y times what? 4x plus 3. So we're going to do about 3 or 4 more with these, with the one with the GCF and all, other than one, next class period. But let me give you, remember right here,